paper on the desk.
Very nice. Good morning, everybody. So I'm going to, as we begin our discussion on the portion of Miketz, I will share with you a very short introduction. In this week's portion, we read about Yosef coming out of jail. He spent many years in jail, I believe 9 years in jail.
Not 12.
12 years, thank you. 12 years in jail, and he comes out because he's able to interpret the dreams to Pharaoh. Pharaoh had 2 dreams. Nobody can interpret them, but Yosef was brought and became, through the interpretation, he became the next leader, the viceroy of Egypt. While he becomes the viceroy, he collects all the foods into storage houses, and he keeps it for the years of famine. There will be 7 years of plentiful, and then 7 years of famine. During the 7 years of famine, all the food is gone from the entire land and the surrounding countries, and everybody is coming to Egypt to purchase food, and they bring all their assets, all their wealth, all their animals. Egyptians themselves sold themselves, as we read at the end of the portion, as slaves to Pharaoh so they can be survived. Yaakov tells his sons, let's go to Egypt and buy food. There is a word in the Torah in this expression, lama titra'u. Lama titra'u means, why are you showing off that we are blessed to eat food and everybody else don't? So let's go and buy food, even though they had. Another interpretation is, why are we getting so skinny? Let's go and get food, because the famine affected his family as well. Regardless, they came in, and when they entered Egypt, they entered separate gates. There were 10 brothers, no Yosef, no Benjamin, and they entered in different gates, and Yosef knew them, he recognized them. They did not recognize Yosef, because when he left, he was 17. Now he was already 30 years old, or 37 actually, and he's already having a long beard. So he speaks to them through an interpreter, and he said, you are spies, and he arrests them for 3 days, then he releases them without Shimon. Simeon has to stay in jail, and then they go back. Yaakov is crying, he's upset. Why are you taking, because the leader of Egypt wanted them to bring back Benjamin. And then we read about them coming back at the end of this week's portion. There is one question that is hovering over that nobody can explain. It's 22 years since Yosef left the house, yet he does not bother to let his father know that he's alive. Yosef was the favorite son. Yosef knew that his father is in great pain every single day. As the Torah tells us, he sat down to mourn after the loss of his son for every single day and refused to get up. How come Yosef is not sending messengers to tell his father, I'm alive, don't worry? And that's the question that the Rabbi is going to address. The real question that the Rabbi is going after is, how come Rashi does not address the question? And therefore, you should be able to decipher the answer from the text itself. We begin. Page 522, second portion in the selection from Likutei Sichos. As explained on many occasions, in his commentary to the Torah, Rashi sought to explain every point that is unclear according to the simple, straightforward meaning of the Torah. If there is a point that seemingly requires explanation according to the Torah's straightforward meaning, and yet Rashi does not focus on it, this is proof that, according to his understanding, the matter is so clear that it does not require explanation, or can be understood based on Rashi's previous explanations. Either it's simple that you can find it in the text answer, or Rashi already addressed that before, that's why he's not bothering to say it again. There is a point in this week's Torah reading that raises questions about how to understand the straightforward narrative and has attracted the attention of several other leading commentaries on the Torah. Nevertheless, Rashi, the foremost of the commentators who focus on the Torah's straightforward meaning, does not focus on it at all. In other words, many commentators address this question. Rashi, the one that is the most basic and straightforward explanation of the text, is failing to address the question. That point is, Yosef knew how much his father loved him. As a result, he was certainly aware of the grief and the mourning of his father was experiencing because of their separation. Why then did he not notify Yaakov that he was still alive at an earlier time? Why does he wait for the brothers to come and he's testing them and then they come a second time and then he reveals himself? What happened for 22 years? The question arises particularly with regards to the time mentioned in our Torah reading. The rabbi goes on to say, during the time that Yosef was a slave, it makes sense he couldn't send a messenger. He had no means. He was in jail. He did not have a cell phone. He did not have a way to send a postage. So you can understand, but this is the first 12 years, 13 years. But he's already the leader in Egypt for 9 years. How come in the last 9 years he did not send a messenger to his father that he is alive? We continue the second one on page 524. On the surface, it is possible to say that this question can be resolved based on the explanation given by Rashi previously. In Parshas Vayeshev, in last week's portion, regarding why Yaakov had to mourn for his son for such an extended period of time, 22 years elapsed from the time Yosef was separated from Yaakov until Yaakov descended to Egypt, corresponding to the 22 years of Yaakov did not fulfill the mitzvah of honoring his parents. At the Torah, last week, Rashi says that Jacob was punished for 22 years to lose his son, to make up for 22 years that he as a son was not there for his parents, honoring them. And because he was gone for 22 years while in Laban's house, therefore God took away his son, his favorite one, for 22 years. It's called measure for measure. It could be said that Yosef did not send messengers to inform his father that he was still alive before these 22 years passed, because Yaakov was being punished for that duration of time for not honoring his parents. So perhaps he didn't send a messenger because he knew it's a punishment period and therefore he's not allowed to shorten it. Says the Rabbi, this, however, is not a satisfactory resolution for Yosef's conduct because I'm going to give you the summary of the three questions the Rabbi is pointing out. Number one, how did Yosef know? Yosef did not know that Yaakov is serving a punishment of 22 years. Only God knew that. And therefore, you cannot say that Yosef knew about it. Number two, he could have told them he is alive, but did not tell him where he is. This way, he's still punished. If Yosef knew, he could have sent a messenger. I want you to know I am alive, but I'm not going to show it you where I am. So you suffer the loss of your son, just like Yaakov was far away from his father, but his father and mother knew where he was, except that he wasn't serving them. So Yosef is not serving his father and mother, is not serving his father while he's in Egypt, without telling Yaakov where Yosef is. And number three, the rabbi says, even if Yosef knew, there is no allowance for Yosef to act according to that punishment. When a punishment comes from God, it is God's job to punish. But if a human being has the opportunity to shorten and remove the punishment, he is obligated to do so. And therefore, if Yosef knew that Yaakov is not going to have a son, his favorite son, for 22 years, as a punishment for not being with his parents, Yosef himself had the obligation to reveal himself and try to shorten it, despite what God decreed. So these are the 3 points the Rabbi make, that it's impossible to say that Yosef did not reveal himself because he was being punished for the 22 years that he did not serve his parents. A, how did Yosef know that there was a punishment there? B, he could have shared with them that he's alive without sharing the place. And C, even if he knew that there was a punishment, it does not excuse a human being for removing the punishment. When God is bringing a punishment to a human being and we have the opportunity to remove it, we are obligated to do that. And that's the reason, by the way, a doctor is required to heal and cure, because you can say, well, it's God's will. If someone got sick It's God's will. It is God's will. But it's God's will that we intervene and try and save a life. And we try and cure and try and help somebody. Yosef, if he knew that there was a punishment from God, it is not just a lame excuse not to reveal himself, but outright wrong, because he should have gone there and tried to reveal himself. So the rabbi said, let's move on to try and explain it. We are in the middle of the page of 525. The above question can be resolved based on another statement of Rashi by Rashi and Parshat Vayeshev. Let's go to Rashi in previous portion and see how Rashi can solve it. That requires clarification. Rashi explains why the Holy One, blessed be He, did not reveal to Yaakov that Yosef was alive as follows. There is a question that Rashi addressed last week, and that is, how come God does not tell Yaakov, God does not tell Yaakov that Yosef is alive? God loved Yaakov. God protected Yaakov. God was always out there telling him, don't fear, I am with you, I'll protect you. Why is God not going to reveal to Yaakov where Yosef is? He could have said to him, Yaakov, don't worry, Yosef is alive. He's just far away from you for a while. Says the Medrash, and Rashi brings it down. Why didn't the Holy One, blessed be He, reveal it to him, to Yaakov? Because Yaakov's son issued a ban of ostracism against and cursed anyone who would reveal the matter to Yaakov, and they had the Holy One, blessed be He, joined together with them. Yitzchak, however, knew that Yosef was alive. Nevertheless, he did not tell Yaakov, for he said, how can I reveal it to him when the Holy One, blessed be He, does not desire to reveal it to him? So the rabbi is going to ask these many questions, but the Medrash tells us, and Rashi brings it a previous portion. When Yosef disappeared and Yaakov says he must be dead and a wild beast devoured him, why didn't God tell him, don't worry, you don't have to sit Shiva, you don't have to mourn, he's alive? Because the tribes, the sons of Yaakov, when they sold him as a slave, they made a pact, a ban of ostracism, meaning that anyone who is transgressing the promise, the oath, should be excommunicated. It cannot be part of society, of their family. And the ban was that they should never reveal the truth. They should keep it among themselves.
Hashem was a 10.
Just a minute, just a minute. And in order for them to make that ban a very, very strong ban, they included God in their ban. How do you include God? Don't ask me. It's not the topic, and perhaps I don't know. But they said to God, you are part of the ban. So therefore, God did not want to reveal it. And Yitzchak, Yaakov's father, was still alive when it happened. Yeah, you know, anybody knows when Yitzchak died? Yitzchak died the day that they put him in the dungeon. I'm sorry, when Yosef came out of the dungeon. The day that he came out of the dungeon, Yitzchak came into the dungeon. It's exactly that same day. But they didn't know about each other. Yitzchak knew that Yosef is alive. But he said, if God is not revealing to my son, I'm not going to reveal it. That's why it says over there, when he refused to stop mourning, it says, Vayev koto aviv. And his father cried after him. One interpretation is his father, Yaakov, cried after his son. But the real text, it just doesn't make sense. It means that Yitzchak cried after his son, Yaakov, because he knew the truth that Yosef is not dead. But he did not want to reveal because he says God is not revealing. God did not want to reveal because they included them in the ban. And therefore, that's what Rashi said. Therefore, God did not share with Yaakov, and Yitzchak did not share with Yaakov because God was not sharing. Did you understand so far? The rabbi goes into a pilpul, the Rabbi, about what does it mean that they included God in the ban. A bunch of commentators say that they included God because they were not a minion. As Harry said, everybody thinks that. Why? Because they were 10, but Reuven was gone. We read that Reuven left. Reuven was the center, was the minionaire. There was no minion. So therefore, they wanted God to be part of the minion in order for them to make a ban. The Rebbe disagrees with it on several points. The two that I remember, probably the Rebbe had more. One, we don't read that Reuven wasn't there when they made the ban. because by the time they did the slaughtering of the goat to send to their father, Reuven was already back. So perhaps they did the ban with Reuven and they had a minyan. Number two, who says you need a minyan for a ban? Doesn't say nowhere. You can make a ban. If you make a pact with another person, you're both obligated to keep it. And if you break that pact, you're excommunicated for breaking a ban. So where does it come, the idea from a minyan? Number two. Number three, says the Rabbi, you cannot put someone in a ban unless they accept and agree. I cannot put you in a ban that you do not go home or to my home. And if you do it, you'll be excommunicated unless you accept that. Where do we see that God agreed to the ban? So these are 3 points that the Rabbi made, that God was not forced into the ban. Number one, those who say that they needed a minyan because Reuven was not there, perhaps Reuven was there. Number two, that what did I say? That they needed the God for a minyan. Who says you? Where does it say in Jewish law a ban is applicable, is applied with all its harshness if someone breaks the ban? It has nothing to do with the minyan.
Is the ban everybody? Or
All of
just
them
the
accepted.
family? Just the family.
Anyone who is part of the ban. It doesn't have to be family, but in that case, it was only the family. The problem is, why do you need God? Says the Rabbi. A, they had a minyan. B, who says you need a minyan? And C, you cannot make someone obligated to the ban, to keep the pact, unless they accept. Where do we see that God accepted it? And the Rebbe says that explains that in Rashi, it says because God did not want to reveal. It doesn't say God was not allowed to reveal. Because God said, if they made a pact not to reveal, I don't want to reveal. We'll find out the reason. But it's not that God was obligated. That's very, very meticulous. The Rebbe points out that in Rashi, we just read, God says, if they made a pact, I don't want to reveal. And Isaac said, if God don't want, I'm not going to. If God was obligated, Yitzchak can say, God is not allowed to, but I am, because I wasn't part of the pact. Therefore, God was not obligated to the ban. All they did was they wanted God to be part of the ban. Not that God is part of the ban, but to put God into the pact. So it should be very obligatory upon themselves, but not obligatory upon God, because you cannot make someone to be part of it. Did you understand so far? Mm-hmm. We're going to go a little bit deeper before we go to back.
Rabbi,
Yes.
I'm sorry, how do we know that Yitzhak knew that what had happened?
I did not ask Yitzchak, but the Medrash says that when the Torah reads, and his father cried after him, it says that all his sons and daughters came to try and console Yaakov, and he refused to be consoled, and he cried after him for many, many days. And then the Torah concludes, and his father cried after him. And the rabbis explain that it's Yitzchak crying about his son, Yaakov,
because of the second repeat of the...
because he knew that Yosef is not dead, but he refused to reveal because he knew God did not want to reveal.
How do you know?
What did he know?
How did he know?
Of course, he was a tzaddik, he knew.
Okay, good. Yeah, he could.
Now, I'm going to continue on to, so I hope so far is that clear? Everybody can follow? We're going to go a little bit deeper before we get to the answer. The rabbi is going to address another question. And the question is, remember they made a ban that no one is allowed to reveal, right? How come they actually revealed at the end of 22 years? It says that they came home and they told them Yosef is alive, right? They had to tell him the whole story because otherwise he wouldn't believe them. He was under the impression that his son is dead. And by the way, he was mourning all day and night. Now they come and say Yosef is alive. He needed the details and they shared. Where does it say that they broke the ban? What happened to the ban? That's the question that the rabbi is going to address. And as we'll find out in a moment.
It was I forget what her name was, Serach or
Serach bat Asher.
right, she was singing to him in a,
But
in
they
a-
told Serach.
No.
Sure. How did she find out?
Ruach HaKodesh.
No, she was a little child. She was 3 years old.
3 years old. There's nothing in the Bible.
No.
So
It says in the Gemara, they said, who is going to reveal it to him? Because if we're going to reveal it to him, he's going to get a heart attack.
Right.
Right? That's the Gemara.
Right.
So they said, let's take the little girl, his granddaughter, whom he loved. She's a little girl, and she's going to start singing. And she started singing, Joseph is alive, Joseph is alive. And then slowly he says, a blessing on your head. I wish it was true. And she says, I think it's true. That's how she broke the news to him. But they had to reveal to Serach. They came back. It doesn't say that they broke the ban, that they nullified the ban. Where is that ban going? That's the
Is this the same Sarah, Sarah Balashi?
yeah,
Yes,
that came,
same one
not
that-
Sarah, Serach.
Serach.
Sarah.
She came out of Egypt. She lived, I believe,
She-
till 900 or 1,000 years.
He's the one who fought Joseph.
She passed
The
away.
same Sarah who saw Joseph's bones, is that?
Yeah, she's the one who revealed Joseph once, and later on she rebukes King David. King David is about to destroy an entire town of Nov, I think. I don't remember.
Right.
She's the one who calls him. There was a lady. It says in the Bible, we read it. A lady came to him and says, how dare you do that? Because one person is seen or one family, you're going to destroy all of them. And he says, so you're right. And he changed. This was Serach bat Asher. She lived for many, many years.
She was around during Yaakov,
She-
during
She lived over I gave her a sermon once. She lived over 1,000 years, 1100.
She was taken
I
alive.
thought she did.
She went to
And she
Ghana.
went because Yaakov said to her, a blessing on your Kob, a bracha of dein Kob, you should live for many years.
I thought she never
So,
died.
so
She
who,
didn't. She went to Gan Eden.
She wanted to live the-
All is important for us is that they broke the ban. Who gave them permission to break the ban? Here is the Rabbi. Some of what I just shared, I'm going to read over because it gets into another topic.
Where are we?
We are page 530.
I'm curious.
The super commentaries to Rashi ask a further question. How did Yaakov's son know that the Holy One, blessed be he, agreed to take part of the ban of the ostracism? Even a mortal cannot be compelled to participate in a ban of ostracism without his consent. How then did they include the Holy One, blessed be he, in the ban without knowing whether he consented? A Jewish law tells us no one can be part of a ban unless they give under agreement. What do you mean they included God? Did they ask God permission before? God said, I agree. These commentaries offered several explanations for how Yaakov's son knew that God did not want to reveal the matter to Yaakov and consented to the ban of ostracism among them. Here is following different explanations that the Rabbi will point out that they don't fit with the text. They said, let's God, we want you to be part of the ban. And they knew God is going to agree to it. How did they know? A, this would enable the covenant Bein Abtarim to be fulfilled. And in that way, Yaakov and his sons would descend to Egypt. They knew that they have to have God included because God do not want Yaakov to know the truth, so that the covenant he made with Abraham that the children will go to Egypt and be slaves can be fulfilled. If God reveals it to Yaakov, that covenant cannot be fulfilled.
Why?
Why?
Why can't he go to Egypt anyways? To
Because
see
he
his son?
won't.
We're going to go see his son. Of course he would go to Egypt to see his son.
That's the commentators say. They say that his son and family moved to Egypt will be fulfilled only upon their discovery that Yosef is the leader and the famine, etc. If Yaakov knows before,
Yeah.
it will not be fulfilled. That's what they say. I'm not going to argue with that because it's the commentators that explain Rashi.
Right.
Number two, Yaakov would be punished for 22 years that he did not fulfill the mitzvah of honoring his father and mother. And therefore, God wanted it not to be revealed, so he should be punished to pay up for the 22 years. Number C, Yaakov will not curse his sons for selling Yosef, were he to have cursed them. The Jewish people whose existence is dependent on the descendants of Yaakov would have been erased from the world, heaven forbid. Another commentator or commentators say that God would not reveal it to Yaakov, because if God revealed it to Yaakov, you know what will happen? Yaakov would curse his children. If he would curse his children, there will be no future. And therefore, God needed to make sure Yaakov is not aware of the real truth. The Rabbi goes on to say many questions. One of them is, that's the point that I wanted, it's in the mix with the text. He could have revealed to Yaakov that Yosef is alive without giving him the location, and that will solve all these problems. First, he wouldn't know that the children did it. Second, he will end up coming to Egypt during the famine when it reveals where Yosef is. And third one, he's going to be punished for 22 years that he didn't honor his father and mother. In other words, the commentators are divided into three groups. Some say that the covenant should be fulfilled, so the family should go to Egypt. The second one is, so he should be punished 22 years for not honoring his parents. The third one is, he can curse his children and there will be no future. Says the Rabbi, there's a simple solution. God can reveal to Yaakov, and therefore Yaakov don't have to mourn. He's still punished for 22 years not having his son, whom he loved so much. He can still end up in Egypt when he discovers where Yosef actually is. And he can also not curse his children simply because he didn't know the children do it. Only after Yosef is alive in Egypt and he meets him or he's told, he knows all the history. Now the Rabbi comes to circles back to the answer. We are page 533. All of the above can be clarified with the preface of another puzzling phenomena. The Rabbi says, let's go to another puzzling issue. Page 533. How was it possible that not one of Yaakov's sons was aroused to repent, confess, and tell Yaakov that they sold Yosef and he was still alive? In particular, this is troublesome, since all the brothers eventually did come to regret their actions, as the Torah relates in this expulsion. They said to one another, indeed, we are guilty because of our brother, and for we witnessed his distress, the distress of his soul, when he begged us. Says the Rabbi, there is another perplexing issue here. 10 brothers are guilty of kidnapping and selling their brother as a slave. Their father refused to be consoled for 22 years. How is it possible that not one of them will not break the ban and tell the truth? Because we read in this expulsion, when they are stressed, being told that they are spies, they say it's a punishment for not having mercy on our brother and not revealing to our father. It says over there in the text. In other words, they felt guilty for 22 years. Not one of them has the heart to share with his father. What's going on here?
Well, they felt guilty 22 years later. We don't know that they felt guilty for the whole 22 years.
Okay, I disagree, but I'm not going to argue with you. That's your opinion that you're entitled to it. The point is, so one of them couldn't come up earlier and tell his father, you know what, we think he's alive. Because actually they went to Egypt, if you read in Rashi, to search for their brother. They knew he's alive in Egypt as a slave. How did Yosef find out that they are spies? Anybody knows? When they came, Yosef says to them, why did you come here? They said, for food. If you came for food, why did you enter in different gates? What did they answer? Part of our mission is to search for a slave in Egypt. They didn't say he's our brother. And Yosef said, and what if you found them? And they said, we will buy him back. And how much, if they ask you for a lot of money, no matter how much money they ask, we will pay for the ransom and we'll take him back. And what if they refuse? And what did they say?
Take him by force.
We'll take him by force. He says, you see, I'm worried that you came out to fight. You have guns in your pockets. You're going to shoot. That's what Yosef said to them. In other words, they know that Yosef is still alive. And if Yosef is still alive, How come they didn't show it their father to save him some pain that he's alive, he's
Did-
sold in
Did
Egypt?
they know that he was still alive?
Yeah, that's why they came to Egypt. That's why they came in
No,
10
they came
gates.
to look for him. They didn't know whether he was alive or not.
They
Even-
assumed that he is alive. It's clear.
And they looked in the worst places.
We'll find out that they knew even for a better reason. But right now, before we get to the answer, they knew Yosef is alive. That's why they came in 10 different gates. Says the Rabbi, how come no one broke the ban earlier? How come no one told Yaakov, don't worry, stop mourning. I think your son is still, our brother is there. Says the Rebbe, in truth, however, this was the brothers' intent when they issued the ban of ostracism. Even initially, they suspected that when their anger would subside, at least one of them would regret what they had done and desire to reveal it to Yaakov, thus harming the others. Therefore, they issued a ban of ostracism against and cursed anyone who would reveal the matter to Yaakov, so that one or several of them would not have permission to reveal the matter to Yaakov. However, it is certainly not logical to say that they issued a ban in such a manner that if they all decided to reveal the matter, when it would be forbidden to, then it would be forbidden for them to reveal it. The Rabbi says, you know what's the purpose of the ban? For that same reason. They're afraid that a weak link, one of them may have a soft heart and change his mind and say, let's tell my father. And then it will cause a lot of harm to the rest of the brothers. That's why they made a ban and no one can reveal. The idea was no one as individual can reveal, but not as a group. As a group, they're allowed to reveal. Now, the last question falls apart, right? That they were allowed to tell their father once they discover Yosef is alive, because they're all together, and all together they can share. The ban was not to reveal. The ban was that not one of them or several of them can reveal, but not all of them can reveal, and that's what they did. The Rabbi goes on. So now we're going to get into the God answer. I'm going to summarize to you because otherwise we're not going to get there. The Rabbi says that's the reason they included God. They didn't need God approval. They didn't need a minion, and they couldn't force God to agree. What they did is they said to themselves, unless all of us agree to reveal, none of us is allowed to reveal, and they included God. In other words, you cannot convince some of us to go with you and reveal to Yaakov. They feared that if one of them has a soft heart, is not allowed to reveal. But how about convincing some of us? Let's get 1 or 2, 3 more, and all 3 of us, 4 of us to go and reveal. And then they will go and cause harm. And that's what they fear. They fear that one can be the catalyst, but he will convince others to reveal. That's why they included God, that no one is allowed to. That means no one, no matter how many, no one. It can be 1, it can be 5, it can be 7. They're not allowed to reveal to Yaakov. The only exception is if all of them agree.
So what's that got to do with God?
So,
That includes God.
so therefore, you
God.
cannot change your mind. You cannot make me change my mind because God is part of it. And God is going to watch that you're not breaking the wall. In other words, God was not part of the band. God was included so that no one can convince others to change their mind. That's what the inclusive of God. And that's why God did not want to reveal to Yaakov. God has his reasons. God did not want to reveal because he wanted Yaakov to be punished for 22 years. God did not want to reveal even the location, so he should suffer. God was not obligated by the ban. The ban has nothing to do with the minion. In the simple text, the reason they put God in the ban is that don't go to a body of you, another brother or 2 brothers, and say to them, let us all 3 reveal the truth to our daddy, so he should be removed, stop all this pain and suffering. And that's the reason they included God. Says the Rebbe, now we can understand what happened. On this basis, we are page 535, the second paragraph. on the top. On this basis, I'm skipping a lot of steps. The Rabbi goes very, very far, much deeper than what we discussed. On this basis, it is possible to understand Rashi's statement. Rashi says, why did the Holy One, blessed be He, reveal it to him? Why didn't He reveal it to him? Because Yaakov's sons issued a ban of ostracism against and cursed anyone who would reveal the matter to Yaakov, and they had the Holy One, blessed be He, joined together with them. Yitzchak, however, knew that Yosef was alive. Nevertheless, he did not want to tell. He did not tell Yaakov, but said, how can I reveal it to him when the Holy One, blessed be He, does not desire to reveal it to him? This is the text of Rashi, says the Rabbi. The Holy One, blessed be He, did not refrain from revealing the matter to Yaakov because he was obligated to observe the ban issued by Yaakov's sons, because he was not part of the ban, so to say, they never agreed, but because he did not desire to reveal the matter to him, as explained above, for many reasons. Accordingly, Yitzchak took a lesson from this and said, how can I reveal it to him when the Holy One, blessed be He, does not desire to reveal it to him? So it wasn't obligated, he just did not want for several reasons. And that, on this basis, the original question can be resolved. Remember the question we had at the beginning? Where was Yosef? Why didn't he send messenger? The reason Yosef did not send a messenger to notify Yaakov that he was alive was that he knew that the Holy One, blessed be He, did not desire to reveal it to him. This taught him that Yaakov did not yet need to know that Yosef was alive. Therefore, Yosef also said, how can I reveal it to him when the Holy One, blessed be He, does not desire to reveal it to him?
So Yosef knew.
According to the simple text, there are many, many other commentaries, other explanations, but it says the Rebbe, Rashi didn't need to address it because he already addressed it when it comes to God and Yitzchak. Yosef knew that God is not revealing it to Yaakov. There must be a reason. If there is a reason, I am not going to reveal it to him.
So Yosef knew by Ruach HaKodesh that this was
He had
going on.
Ruach HaKodesh, we see it all over.
Right.
But I want to continue. The Rabbi didn't finish yet. There are still questions that require clarifications. A, because of the ban of ostracism, it was forbidden for Yaakov's son to inform him that Yosef was alive. How then did they ultimately do so? Where do we see that they broke the ban? B, how did Yosef instruct them to tell Yaakov that he was alive, since God did not reveal the matter to Yaakov? You say Yosef does not reveal it to Yaakov because God is not doing it. Yeah, God didn't do it yet, so why is he revealing himself? These questions are also clarified by Rashi in his commentary. And the verse, Yaakov saw that there was grain being sold in Egypt. Rashi comments, he saw with a lens of holiness that he still had hope in Egypt. But it was not an actual prophecy to explicitly inform him that this was Yosef. Anybody is familiar with that Rashi? It's an amazing Rashi. It says, Vayar Yaakov saw, ki yesh sheber b'Mitzrayim. The words are translated in the simple English to simple English. There was hope, or there is food sustenance in Egypt. But Rashi tells us differently. Rashi says he had prophecy, but he wasn't sure about the prophecy. It's like an opaque image. You see something through an opaque glass. You don't know if it's a giraffe, or it's an elephant, or it's a human, but you see an image. He told his children, I see there is hope. There is a light of hope in Egypt. So let's go and buy food there. He told it to the sons. They knew what he meant. He knew that his son is in Egypt and there is an opportunity to find them. Now they realize that maybe it's the time God is trying to reveal it and breaking it slowly. So when Yaakov tells his sons to go to Egypt, the Torah uses the language that also means that he told his sons, I see some type of hope. He didn't know what he was talking about. They knew.
Yaakov couldn't have.
Upon hearing their father use this term, Yaakov's sons, who knew Yosef was in Egypt, understood that this vision emanated from a lens of holiness and that God was informing them that the time had come to seek out Yosef and ultimately inform Yaakov that Yosef was alive. Therefore, the brothers of Yosef descended, as Rashi explained, this wording indicates that they regretted selling him and decided to behave towards him in a brotherly manner and to ransom him for whatever amount of money would be demanded of them. They knew when he says, what do you say? A lens of holiness. There was a lens of holiness to Yaakov, a spark, and he didn't know what he was talking about. But the brothers who knew that he was sold to Egypt, they knew exactly what's going on. Now they said, we were going to be good brothers. We're going to ransom him no matter what it is. So they saw that God is beginning to reveal it to Yaakov, and therefore they together are able to break the ban, and therefore Yosef is allowed to. That's what the Rabbi says. Similarly, similar concepts apply regarding Yosef notifying his father, who, when he saw that his brothers were endeavoring to find him, he understood that something was afoot. Nevertheless, since he did not know with certainty that the appropriate time had come to inform Yaakov, and moreover, and primarily since he knew that were he to inform Yaakov before his brothers did, he would damage the relationship with Yaakov, he therefore refrained from notifying Yaakov by a messenger. Accordingly, he told his brothers, I am Yosef, your brother, knowing that they, who had issued the ban of ostracism, would surely realize when the Holy One, blessed be he, desired to inform Yaakov, and they would tell him Yosef is still alive. Do I need to summarize what we studied?
Sure.
I'm surprised about one thing.
Let me just summarize, then we'll. The Rebbe is asking, how come Yosef for 22 years did not send a messenger to Yaakov to tell him that he is in Egypt, knowing that Yaakov is in great pain? And the commentators explain that because Yaakov had to be punished. Says the Rebbe, does not answer the question. Number one, how did Yosef know about it? Number two, he could have sent a messenger to tell Yaakov that he's alive, but don't give the location. And number three, even if God is punishing somebody, if we have an opportunity to alleviate the pain, we are obligated to do so. Then the Rabbi goes on another question, as far as I remember, is the ban. It says that why Yitzchak didn't reveal, the father didn't reveal to his son, to Yaakov, is because God did not want to, so he did not want either. Ask the Rabbi, why didn't God want to? Because there was a ban. What does God have to do with a ban? Ask the Rabbi, how can you make someone be forced into a ban without his agreement? So some commentators said that Reuven wasn't there, therefore they didn't get for a minion, so they added God for a minion. Says the Rabbi, number one, we're not sure Reuven wasn't there. According to the simple text, Reuven was back there, so they had a minion. Number two, you don't even need a minion. Number three, you can't have someone join a ban unless they are part of it. And now the Rabbi comes up with the final question. If they made a ban not to reveal, how is it possible that they break the ban? So says the Rebbe, God was not part of the ban. They cannot force God into the ban. They didn't need a minion for a ban. What they did was they made a ban that no one individually or as a group, part of the family, should reveal it to Yaakov. Why? They were afraid for the wrath of Yaakov. And therefore they included God. They says, God will punish you. God, you're the witness. But they cannot put God in a ban, and they didn't need God in a ban. That explains why they reveal it at the end, because they're all together. That reveals, says the Rebbe, now we're left with why Yitzchak didn't want to. God had his reasons. Yitzchak says, if God has a reason, I don't want to reveal. What happened now that the sons realize that it's time to reveal because God wants to reveal? Is because we read when Yaakov tells his sons, go to Egypt, ki yesh shever b'Mitzrayim, he says, there was a spark of prophecy. He said, I see there is hope for me there. And they knew that what it meant is that perhaps God wants to reveal to him that Yosef is alive. Now when they go and they meet with Yosef, Yosef says, I'm Yosef, go and tell your father. He didn't want to reveal himself because if he would reveal it himself, the father would be extremely angry at his brothers. Therefore, he needed to devise a plan that they go back, they share with their father, and this way the father will forgive them and never hold back against them. And that's the end of this week's portion. God willing, next week we will not be in class.